In the last video, I was talking about the CAS review into health services provided for trans people, particularly those under the age of 18. Um, Although I think actually talking about trans children is just a misnomer. I think it's misleading because you cannot legally transition until 18 anyway. But there's a number of things around this that I think are worth commenting on a bit more. In that last video, I spoke about some of the things that celebrities have come out with, particularly the Harry Potter stars. But there's others, David Tennant, Eddie Redmayne, and numerous leading politicians as well. Some of those comments, I think, reiterate the sort of intolerance, not just of the trans lobby itself, but of those who jump on the bandwagon. Now, by intolerance, what I mean is these sort of black and white statements like trans women are women, and anyone who says otherwise is a bigot. That's not verbatim, but that's basically the message that is being put out. With that being said, there's a number of reports that the Daily Telegraph has covered, the Sunday Telegraph, I should say, from the 14th of April. I'm just going to refer to them a little bit because I think it reiterates the problems that we're seeing. Um, don't let trans activists bully you, teachers told. I'm not going to read out this whole report, but I'll just touch on it. This is by Camilla Turner and Sarah Napton. Teachers must not allow themselves to be bullied by transgender campaigners into allowing children to change gender without their parents' knowledge, the minister has said. Damien Hines, the schools minister and a former education secretary, told the Telegraph teachers must not feel pressured, and the landmark review into the treatment of transgender children by the NHS draws a line in the sand. The intervention comes in the wake of a report by Dr. Hilary Cass, a leading paediatrician, which found that social transitioning should be approached with extreme caution because we simply do not know the long-term impacts. Mr. Hines said nobody working with children should be vilified or called a transphobe for making difficult decisions which are in their best interests. Draft guidance from the Department for Education, published at the end of last year, told schools to presume that a child could not change gender. Well, legally they can. To me, that's a no-brainer because you have to be 18 to actually go through the whole sex change process anyway. Under the new Parent First approach, head teachers must tell parents if their child wants to change gender. I think that's absolutely appropriate. Now, this page, the Daily Telegraph, the Sunday Telegraph kind of does double page in the old broadsheet format. They have four more reports related to the issue that is. Much ado about library events suggesting Shakespeare was female. This is by Ewan Somerville. The London Library has been accused of hosting an anti-intellectual conspiracy theory with an event that claims Shakespeare could have been a woman. The 19th century institution in St James's Square is running a panel discussion with Elizabeth Winkler, the author of a book titled Shakespeare Was a Woman and Other Heresies, which explores who may perhaps have been hiding behind his name. Now, I wouldn't censor that. It's a point of view, even if it is a fringe view, but I wouldn't at all be surprised if there's an agenda there. To say that that's pushing a gender agenda with that. Belgium and Netherlands question puberty blockers. Now, even liberal Netherlands has, come into this. This is by James Crisp. Belgium and the Netherlands have questioned the use of puberty blockers on children after the CAS review warned of a lack of research on the gender treatment's long-term effects. Britain has become the fifth European nation to restrict the use of the drug to under 18s after initially making them part of their gender treatments. Their use was based on the Dutch protocol, the term used for the practice pioneered in the Netherlands in 1998 and copied around the world of treating gender dysphoric youth using puberty blockers. Excuse me. The NHS stopped prescribing the drug meant to curb the trauma of a body maturing into gender the patient does not identify with this month. In Belgium, doctors have called for gender treatment rules to be changed. In our opinion, Belgium must reform gender care in children and adolescents, following the example of Sweden and Finland, where hormones are regarded as the last resort, the report by three paediatricians and psychiatrists in Leuven said. Figures from the Netherlands and the UK show more than 95% of individuals who initiated puberty inhibition continue with gender-affirming treatments, a report by V. Vank Rung P. K. Castells K. and J. De Vleming said. Hope I've got those pronunciations right. However, when young people with gender dysphoria go through their natural puberty, these feelings will only persist in about 15%. The report was published after a 60% rise in the number of Belgian teenagers taking the blockers to stop the development of their bodies. In 2022, 684 people between the ages of 9 and 17 were prescribed the drug, compared to 432 in 2019, that the Morgan newspaper reported in 2019. Pressure is also building in the neighbouring Netherlands to look again at their use. Parliament has ordered research into the impact of puberty blockers on adolescents' physical and mental health. The Telegraph understands that the Amsterdam Centre of Expertise in Gender Dysphoria, where the protocol originated, is set to make a statement on the use of puberty blockers next week. I too thought that the Dutch gender care was very careful and evidence-based, but now I don't think that anymore. Giles Smids, a postdoctoral researcher in medical ethics at Erasmus University in the Netherlands, told The Atlantic. The CAS review said that the NHS had moved away from the restrictions of the original Dutch protocol. I think it's pretty obvious that numerous governments have been basically pandering to the trans lobby on this. And for me, that rise in Belgium, 684 in 2022, compared to 432 in 2019, doesn't suggest that there are more trans children. It suggests that there's far too casual an approach in kind of rushing to prescribe hormones and rushing to prescribe this sort of treatment rather than looking into more complex issues. I think that's been happening across the board. Go just cover two more case reports, maybe not read out the whole thing. Rowling, politicians snuggle up to groups like Stonewall, by Steve Bird. J.K. Rowling has accused politicians of snuggling up to controversial transgender campaigners to the detriment of very vulnerable children and women. The Harry Potter author also called for an investigation into why pro-trans groups like Stonewall and Mermaids were given privileged places at the table, with the language and opinions embraced by political parties. Her comments came just days after Dr. Hilary Case, a paediatric consultant, published a review which found that gender care was currently an area of remarkably weak evidence. CAS review warns how treatment with puberty blockers may change the trajectory of psychosexual and gender identity development, but critically do not change a patient's body dissatisfaction or gender dysphoria. The report called for unhurried care of those under 25 who think they may be transgender. In a series of comments on social media, Rowling rounded on Stonewall, which campaigns for the LGBTQ community, and Mermaids, a transgender support group, for their parts in promoting the transgender narrative. She wrote yesterday, in 2018, Stonewall literally told schools to shred a research pack saying there were risks of puberty blockers. In 2022, Stonewall told the world that research suggests 2-year-olds can be trans. That to me is frankly repugnant. I'll say it right now. It advocated for nurseries to start teaching kids that there are more genders than boy and girl. Politicians have snuggled up to Stonewall and Mermaids, given them privileged places at the table, and adopted their talking points to the detriment of very vulnerable children, young people, and women. When are we going to see this fully investigated? When will this end? A Stonewall spokesman said the CAS review could play a vital role in helping to secure equality healthcare for trans and gender diverse children. He added, "We urge NHS England and policymakers to read and digest the full report and consider Dr. Cass's plea to remember the children and young people trying to live their lives and the family carers and clinicians doing their best to support them." That's pretty damn rich coming from Stonewall, when they have very much fueled the narrative that if you sort of step outside their dogma, then you're a transphobic bigot. I mean, they're talking about um, understanding young people and compassion for young people, but they have lobbied for puberty blockers for children. They have lobbied for teenage girls to get mastectomies. So I think Stonewall is in no position to, be pontificating on this, given that they, I think, have been a big part of the intolerant dogma that has come out. I don't have much time for Stonewall. I think they started off as a worthwhile human rights group for lesbian and gay issues, but particularly around the trans issue, they've become quite a bullying lobby. I don't have much time for them. And then the third report, Taxpayers fund study into transphobic archaeology. And this might seem like a fringe issue, but it's the sort of thing that's happening. This report's by Charlotte Gill. The taxpayer is funding a PhD researcher who's exploring a transphobic innovations of archaeology at the University of York, prompting one Conservative MP to call for a review of the use of taxpayer funds for higher education. The student, who is being paid a stipend by the Arts and Humanities Research Council of approximately £18,622 a year, presented a paper earlier this year titled "Bones Don't Care About Your Feelings: Challenging Transphobic Innovations of Archaeology in Social Media." A slide from the presentation asks, "What if I told you that when an archaeologist finds human remains, it is a fact that there are only two choices for gender identification?" The slide features branding for the University of York UK Research and Innovation, a non-departmental government body that distributes funds for research, and AHRC's White Rose University Consortium, a doctoral training partnership between the universities of Leeds, Sheffield, and York. But that's just a sort of thing that would be contentious because this is publicly funded. Now, this researcher can believe what they want. They can. I support academic research pretty much in any field. I think if there is evidence, if research is done in a thorough way, then that's there's academic interest in that. But I think if the researcher is going out there with an agenda rather than just trying to find things that are evidence based, then it does call into question the fact it's taxpayer funded. And regarding the other report, why is it that 6 out of those 7 clinics refuse to take part in the CAS review? What does Stonewall have to say about that? They claim ethical concerns. Well, there's legitimate ethical concerns about the likes of mermaids. I think for Stonewall to advocate that research suggests 2-year-olds can be trans, that is sick. Quite honestly, that's sick. I don't care what people think of me using that word. I think it is, to say that a 2-year-old, a toddler, can be trans is just, a 2-year-old can barely establish, you name it. The idea that they can understand the complexities of human biology, I just think it's that's the sort of thing that is so contentious about trans ideology. Um, I firmly believe that where children are concerned, right up to even teenagers. Now, I've said in another video, teenagers are more critically thinking. They're older than children, like children, but even teenagers are vulnerable in this sense. There have been cases of teenage girls getting mastectomies and later regretting it, basically destroying their life. What support is given to detransitioners? I remember a few years ago there was a study at Newcastle University, and it immediately got kind of stonewalled and blacklisted. Funding was cut. The trans lobby really put pressure on them because they were looking into what results was found from detransitioning. For example, how many detransitioners there actually are, how many people regret making the transition, this sort of thing. Now, that surely should be part of the debate. Why are they ignored? Why are they not given support? Where's the compassion for them? Um, so anyway, I'll just conclude. All of these things show that this is one of the big socio-political issues of our time, and it does have very real world effects in terms of, certainly in terms of healthcare, in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of education. Education, in terms of so many areas of public life. Um, if I would underline 2 things that I feel about this, you know, there is definitely ground for compassion. There's definitely a ground for treating this subject with some sensitivity. But where I draw a line is this idea that women, particularly anyone, but women in particular, because they've been particularly targeted, should be bullied, silenced, smeared, lose their jobs because they insist that biology matters. I think that is a disgrace. And the other area I would draw a line is really injecting this ideology into children. A child may well be confused. You may have a little boy who wears dresses That doesn't mean he's trans. It may simply mean he's effeminate, he's gay in later life. That doesn't mean he wants to physically become a girl. Um, Children change their minds all the time. So simply because a child says, I want to be a girl, should a responsible adult pander to that? I do sympathise with the pressure parents might feel under if they have a child that is saying this. But the idea of rushing into sort of puberty blockers and so on strikes me as incredibly irresponsible, particularly given the physical toll that that takes. I understand that even adults who go through a transition, it's physically quite demanding. This isn't a simple magic pill where you just change sex. I understand it is quite strenuous, and they have to actually live in the body of the gender that they want to change to. I think it's good that England has blocked hormones and so on for under 18s. I hope Scotland follows suit under a new government. Um, but the other thing I would just close with is I really resent the way hate is thrown around. Like anyone who doesn't pander to the trans narrative is a hateful bigot. They use this word hate very frequently. They throw it around and they'll say, oh, well, you're contributing to trans people taking their own lives. I think it's unreasonable to say because you're engaging in an important debate, you're therefore pushing people to take their own lives. It's tragic that that happens. So people should be treated with sympathy. But, you could make the argument if people talk about having justice for criminals, inmates take their own lives, then, you know, suicide, unfortunately, is a big problem across the board. Some people are more vulnerable than others, but I don't think debate should just end because there is a problem of suicide. I think the answer to suicide is for people to get professional help, to get counselling, to get support, but not to silence debate on important issues.